get people into the room, I said, coffee, bagel, seat. So if you missed one of those and you got the seat before the coffee and the bagel, so you can feel free to, it's not an insult, you can get up and get a bagel or a coffee, in whatever order you want. I'm coming off of flying in and dealing with a bunch of other stuff, so I'm going to need a few more coffees before I really get into the spirit of things. But I wanted to welcome everybody first thing in the morning. Very soon, David Sable, the CEO of the Y&R Group, will be coming to give his perspective. And I'll thank him again when he gets here. But can't really move forward without thanking Y&R and everybody associated with Y&R for hosting us, for giving us the space from now until 9 p.m. tonight. So you can come and go as you please. So there's a lot of great content during the day. And in terms of the messaging space, I'm not going to say too much because you'll hear from people a lot smarter than I and much more deeply involved on a day-to-day basis, actually doing it rather than designing something for some people to do it. So I'll let them speak more. The way I look at all of this is as follows. 18 years ago, I got involved in a space called voice over IP, or what some people referred to then as internet telephony. And it was one of the first uses of the internet infrastructure at the time, the global internet infrastructure, to kind of communicate in new and interesting ways, or so we thought. And I'll share with you this quick story, which I used to tell at conferences of my co-founder, Jeff Pulver, who ran a very successful series of conferences in the late 90s and the beginning of whatever decade that was, back in the 90s. And I used to tell this story, but I think it's very apropos in terms of what's going on today. So I co-founded a company called Delta 3 in the voice over IP space, based here in New York with developments in Israel. And we were one of the first, Jeff will say the first, but we were one of the first commercial voice over IP providers. And from founding the company until really getting critical mass of people using the service, then was about 3 years. Today, time is much more compressed. We worked for about 3 years. And it was 3 years of us and lots of other companies spending enormous amounts of resources and energy and time and so on and money to get voice to work properly over the internet. And finally, we got to the point where I could make a call from Israel to New York, and I was confident of it, and I was able to promote it to people, and I was so excited. But one of the first kind of calls I made outside of the team speaking to each other, one of the first calls I made was to my grandfather, who passed away since, but who lived in Queens. And I called him up, ring, 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 and in Yiddish, grandfather is Zaidi, so I said, Zaidi, so he picks up the phone. I said, Zaidi, it's Jacob calling from Israel. He said, oh, hi. And for my grandfather, like many people of his generation, phone calls were kept to usually milliseconds or seconds because of how expensive they were, especially if I was calling from Israel. So he basically was already preparing to hang up. And I said, Zaidi, I got to tell you something. I'm calling over the internet. And my grandfather says, sounds like a phone call, and hangs up. And what was the impact of that story? Which is that I was so excited that I had used technology to do something which was an everyday thing. Behind the scenes, we were doing it completely different. But for my grandfather, from a user-facing point of view, it was exactly the same product that he knew. It was a phone call. Now, we were shattering all kinds of regulatory issues. We were taking phone calls from $2 a minute from Tel Aviv to New York and making them 2 cents a minute or free sometimes. So we were doing a lot, but the experience really didn't change so much. And if we flash forward 18 years, I think the experience has changed dramatically in terms of the way we communicate. Whether it's these supercomputers that we walk around with, how we communicate with people, the expectations, even those of us who watched all this happen, the expectations that we have today for the immediacy of communications, the antsiness we get when somebody doesn't answer within seconds, have changed the way we look at things. And the only other story that I'll share with you in terms of how things evolve was that my father-in-law is a lawyer here in New York, and I, as some people know, and I don't like it to spread too far, but I have a law degree. And for a little while, just to convince myself I didn't want to be a lawyer, I worked in his law firm. And I was so frustrated then how little technology they were using. Everything was still paper and so on and so forth. And I tried to get them digital, but I wasn't succeeding. Anyway, years later, finally they get email, and I get my first email from my father-in-law, from Daniel Krasner, and it was some mundane thing that he sent me. But I was so excited, I wrote back, I said, wow, Dan, welcome to the digital world. This is great, this is wild, we're going to be able to communicate like this. I'm just so excited. Anyway, about 5 seconds later, I get a email back, don't be so excited, Betty, his secretary. And to this day, my father-in-law was a very successful security litigator here in New York, very active, has Betty print out all of his emails, and he dictates the responses to Betty. So, you can, try and teach a fill-in-the-blank new tricks, but sometimes they'll use a hack and go around whatever it is that you were trying to do. When we started to think about Zula a couple of years ago and looked at the communication space, especially around teams communicating, there were a lot of things that influenced us, but one of the major things that influenced us is that some of the dreams that we had 18 years ago and 15 years ago really were finally possible in terms of breaking down barriers and allowing people really just to communicate. As Hillel Fuld, our CMO, who's busy tweeting away over there, likes to say, to allow people to communicate without thinking how they're communicating, without spending the 20 minutes trying to figure out how to make a conference call, or the half an hour trying to get right the file sharing that you were trying to do, or whatever it is. We've got an incredible amount of technology available today. We have incredible reach. The prices have come down dramatically, but we've got a long way to go. And we see ourselves and all the other companies in our space having an incredible challenge to get people to just communicate and not think how they're communicating, and really make things, what I like to say, more joyful and delightful. People often ask in the venture world, I don't know if there are any VCs here yet, I know there's VCs who are planning to join us later, some venture capitalists, but venture capitalists, and especially associates in venture capital firms, when they don't have anything else to say in a meeting, will ask the entrepreneur, what's the pain point that you're trying to solve? And I've played all roles. I've been an investor, an entrepreneur, board member, angel investor, and I always hated that question. And when I'm on the side of the entrepreneur, especially over the past 2 years when I've gone back to it full time, and I talk to VCs or VC-like people, and they say, what's the pain point? I say, there is no pain. My father-in-law doesn't know that he's in pain. He's very happy dictating his responses to Betty. He doesn't have any pain. But if I can, even for him, certainly for somebody coming out of university right now, make their work communication experience more joyful and delightful, wow, I've done something. And along with that, hopefully comes things like productivity and efficiency and so on and so forth. But at a very basic level, if we can make their communication experience more joyful and delightful, especially in the workspace where we often don't think of joy and delight, together with messaging, if we can get that to happen, we've done a tremendous amount. So, I'd like you to kind of think of that as you hear people speaking today. Certainly ask them questions in real time. You can ask them questions through whatever digital medium you want. Obviously, I'm happy if you use Zula to ask questions, but if you want to tweet them out or however you want to do it, or just classic, good old-fashioned way, shout the question. You can, if you download Zula, and the salesman in me has to tell you, if you download Zula and you go to that link, you'll automatically go to the space of this conversation. And I was just talking with one of our later speakers about privacy and issues of privacy and how we talk and communicate. And there are some mediums which have developed over the past couple of years which are very, very public mediums. And we're really only at the early days, I believe, figuring out, when do I say something to the world? When do I say it just to kind of a community like this? And when do I say it just to, my team at my own company? And when do I not say it at all? And better not to, not to say it and not to write it and keep it to yourself. And we're really just kind of learning all of that anew. And the rules are, getting written and rewritten almost on a daily basis. This space, for example, if you go into it, is only for people who are in the space. In other words, it's only the people who have that link, who've gone in. It's not being seen, it's not searchable on Google right now. We don't plan on making it searchable on Google. And it's creating a more safe space, if you will, for the conversation to take place. On the other hand, I've seen, and I'm sure we've all seen, pretty sensitive stuff being debated out on whether it be Twitter in a completely public way, in LinkedIn, Facebook, other mediums, where things which you think are going to be private are actually out there in the public. So those are some of the kind of themes and issues which we deal with on a daily basis. We love your input as we move along. We're in our process right now ourselves of creating the next version of our vision of how people will communicate. So anything people have to say, we would love to hear. Feedback from you is the most important thing. I've seen that David Sable, our host, is here. He was here. And he's coming in. So I'll thank him again as he walks in. Yes?
Good question. What is your opinion on apps like CyberDust or messaging apps which are more for the people who want to be anonymous or the one that think you can be flagrant on the internet? What's your take on that? Because I know Mark Cuban is heavily into that.
Right. So later on we're going to hear more about ephemeral messaging, and then there's anonymous messaging and so on. So I find it, let's put it this way. If you saw a letter to the editor 30 years ago, a letter to the editor in a newspaper, signed anonymous, and it was full of accusations, and it was full of kind of bad stuff or whatever, and it was signed anonymous. You look at it and go, come on, if you have something to say, be proud of what you have to say. What's with the anonymous? So that debate is not a new one. Whether a voice should be heard as an anonymous voice or not. I think we think it sometimes, we think it's a new one because it's on new platforms, but I don't think it's a new one. I think what's kind of new, obviously, is the massive amount of communication that takes place, the river, stream, or sometimes avalanche. And when I talk about rules being written and rewritten and so on, so there's an expression in Hebrew which is called lashon hara, which means the bad tongue. And that expression came up a couple thousand years ago. It's not a new expression. So I think part of our writing and rewriting rules is kind of creating a new social contract as to, like I said before, sort of sometimes you shouldn't even say it, whether it's you're saying it anonymously or not anonymously. I have my own opinions of things like secret and whisper and so on. By and large, I think they're bad. To use a very technical term, I think they're bad for the world, for the most part. I know the other side of the debate, right? But I think they're about like that. Anyway, David is here, and he's got a much busier schedule than certainly me. But I think you were ready when you weren't here. But I just wanted to not turn it over to Michelle for the official introduction without saying thank you so much for giving us an incredible space for our conversation today. So thank you.
Haven't heard of him. He's the global CEO of YNR, and he's actually hosting us today at the summit. So thank you, David. YNR is one of the world's leading global marketing communications company. I have it written down, 187 offices in 91 countries. That's a pretty big company. And that's it. I'm excited to hear what David has to say. So welcome, David.
I don't have a mic, but hopefully